I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. Iceland is probably not any different than Australia. I just came from there a couple of weeks ago. It seems to be a sort of big black hole globally about PFCs. And before I leave the stage, I would like for you to tell me if you understand what a PFC is. It's something that we have known for quite a while, but we have to realize that we are up against some very large chemical companies in the world. And I'll show you a slide in the end, because I think they turned it around. Now, what I'm going to try to do is to give you facts in this. And a little bit of what we do. We are innovators in this field. And we have developed some very complex and new generation foam product without any kind of PFC. But we do continually pioneer the firefighting foam technologies to meet the latest demands globally. Now, you heard Bo talk about the company that pulled out of the market, and that was 3M. Now, we were a 3M manufacturer for Scandinavia, UK, and part of Europe. And 16th of May in the year 2000, they called us and said, we are getting out of this business, and we asked them why. And then they said, well, we know now that the fluorosurfactant PFOS has a PBT profile. And that's a question I'm going to ask you at the end of the day. What is a PBT profile? With that, we mean P stands for persistency. And defining persistency of a PFC, it means that the chemical can have a persistency of a half-lifetime of 10,000 years. So once you use it, you won't get rid of it. So persistency is something that is really up on the red light right now globally. And the B stands for bioaccumulative, which means that it bioaccumulates through the food chain. And T stands for toxic. Excuse me. So what does it mean in order to innovate and come up with a new technology? Everybody thinks that if you take a look at this line here, it's a straight line. Well, it's not a straight line. What it really looks like is this here. Because you are going into a field where you have to have failures in order to know where not to go, in order to find a solution. And what we had to do was to come up with something that didn't have the PBT profile. And we had to come up with a product that was just as good or better than the old technology, like was shown here earlier today, the AFFFs and the fluoroprotein foams. And also at an acceptable price. Because innovation can be very expensive, and believe me, this has been very expensive what we have done. Because it's a new world out there. Going through a little bit about the foam history. And, if you take a look at here, foam is not new. It started in 1915 and was called a chemical foam. It was two different chemicals that reacted with each other, and then you got a foam. And then during the Second World War, they started with protein foam. And protein foam, what's that made from? Do you know? It's made from hoofs and horns and intestines of animals. And it smells really bad. For any of you that has been involved in that, yes, it smells really, really bad. Now, you can also see that it started with a 6% concentrate. And then later, it went to a 3% concentrate. Now, the reason for that is the 6% is much easier to make. Because when you make a 6% concentration, the chemicals are not that packed in there. Like when you take a look at the 3% in 1945. And then in 1952 it was an alcohol-resistant form, and then it was freeze-protected in 1955. What happened was that during the Second World War, the Navy had these big aircraft carriers, and they have airplanes that crashed on top of it. And what they wanted to do, they wanted to save the pilots, the aircraft that just pushed right out to sea. But they noticed one thing, that it had a very sort of poor sort of quickness in extinguishing the fire. It was too stiff. So they asked 3M to come up with something that was much better. And this is the AFFF, and that started in 1963 after some innovation. And of course 3M, that was PFOS. It was a fluorosurfactant, and it was really good in extinguishing. Now, it started with 6%, and then in 1972 it was 3%, alcohol resistant in 1973. And then in 1971, we were the ones that developed the 1%. And why do we have 1%? Yes, because the oil and gas industry, they asked us for a 1%. Now, on an offshore platform, if they can save 1 ton of weight on a platform, they save 20 tons of infrastructure, superstructure around on a platform. Which means that some of these platforms in the North Sea, they contain 130,000 liters of foam concentrate, 1%. If they were going with 3%, they would need 390,000 liters. And of course, you can just imagine what kind of massive building that would be. So they asked us to come up with 1%. Now also, you know, going over here to the protein branch, they started putting in PFCs, fluorosurfactants, 1965, 6%, 3%, and then we freeze protected. Now the fluoroprotein foams have not been developed into a 1% because it doesn't work that way. Then, after year 2000, we realized we've got to come up with something else because we cannot live with this. Now, we realized it, and our customers too. We have some really big customers, especially in the oil and gas field, that came to us and said, we cannot live with this anymore because we know that fluorosurfactants are no good. It got the PVT profile, persistency, bioaccumulative, and also toxic. And we cannot live with that because in the future, we are moving our production into the Arctic area, Barents Sea. It's going to do what to the fisheries? You're going to find it in the marine life. And we know that if this continues, we're not going to be able to drill up north. And we're not going to have any kind of production up north. So they knew already in 2000, so they said, you've got to get up the speed in the innovation. So we started out with 6%. Actually, that was in 2003 down in Australia. And in Norway, we were doing this in 2004. But then in 2005, we had a 3%. And Does everybody know what a 3% concentrate means? Well, it means that if when you induct this with water, you have 97% of water and 3% concentrate, which means that 1%, you have 1% and then 99% water, which means that if you put it into an example, you use 1 liter of 1% foam and 99 liters of water, and then you have a foam solution. So you see that 1% is used mainly by the offshore platforms due to weight and tank size. Now the alcohol-resistant one came 3x6 in 2007 and as a 3x3 product in 2015. When we talk about the ETC, it's an alcohol type concentrate, which means it works just as well on hydrocarbons and also on water miscible fuels, which might be alcohols like methanol or whatever. So that continued, and in 2013 we finished with a 1% concentrate. And that was a requirement, especially for Statoil in the North Sea. And like I said, they told us, get up your speed, do the innovation, and we'll help you. So we entered into a contract with them. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But this is sort of the timeline that we are talking about. Now, reheating foam, we got actually, there was something that was missing here. I don't know why. But anyway, in 2014, we received the Presidential Green Chemistry Award in the United States. And that's a very high sort of recognition in the United States even for coming up with a product that does not contain any kind of perfluorocarbons, PFCs. There's something else that's missing, but it must be that the computer does not take everything. But anyway, the offshore business, especially in Norway, it has a very complex and difficult operation out there in the North Sea. But they are very strong emphasis on strict HUC standards. And they have an excellent HUC track record. North Sea exploration and production. And they started a scrutiny on chemicals released into the North Sea already in year 2000. As you can see down here, they started color-coding chemicals. And this is what we had to live with. Now, I'll show you something here. The loop portfolio, which was what we entered into Statoil. Still missing a bunch of stuff there, but anyway, I can still talk about it. The OSPA. Have anybody heard about the OSPA Commission? It's the Oslo Paris Convention. And if you take a look here, Iceland actually signed it because it deals with discharges, emissions, and losses of hazardous substances. Down here was supposed to be a line right now where actually they want background emissions of persistent chemicals to be close to zero, which means that any kind of chemical with a color code black cannot be released into the North Atlantic. Iceland signed it. Now, I'll show you a picture here of an offshore platform in the North Sea. The depth there is 340 meters. In 2009, that platform released a triple F into the sea. Well, everybody thought that this foam went away. They thought because of the waves and the current was swept away. Let's forget about it. In 2015, take a look down here, when they start drilling. Today, they take drill caps and they had to bring it onshore, and it's being tested for environmental chemicals. And boy, did they get a big surprise, because these chemicals showed up here in the drill caps, and it were PFCs. And now the EPA in Norway, they really got us out, because what's happening on the sea bottom of all the other platforms? I started talking about the color coding system. And the color coding system, if you take a look here, it's black. And any kind of chemical that's persistent is black. And ladies and gentlemen, all PFCs are persistent, and they come into this one here, that's black. Which means it's not supposed to be released into the environment. And this is why Statoil told us you have to get us back out of the black sector, because we cannot live with this. What's persistency? Is it going to disappear in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days? Or is it going to be 10,000 years? Well, we really don't know. But we know that persistency is something that's going to stick around with us. And this is increasing globally. Now, what we have to do, and what we started doing, that each chemical we used, we had to screen in a certain way, just to make sure that it did not contain any kind of PFCs. And that was another big surprise we had, because it turns out that the REACH regulation, it doesn't cover this. So we found that a lot of chemicals that are being used off that contains PFCs. So what we had to do, we screened them, Statoil screens them, because we had to make sure that for the next 20 years we didn't get any big surprises. And then we send them away for additional testing. It's costing us up to about 10,000 euros for each chemical. If you take a look, before we are done with the formulation, we might have something like 300 and 400 formulations before we see a product that's going to work. So it's a different world out there. The cost of doing what we do right now is a different world. Before, you could go to a PFC manufacturer and say, I want to buy some perfluor surfactants from you, and they give you the formulation, and you didn't have to do anything. So the world is different out there. Too bad, because this picture here was supposed to show what happened to DuPont last year. In 2015, DuPont was found guilty. I can talk through this this picture here, but DuPont was found guilty of the first case where somebody got cancer in the United States. And there are 3,500 other people that are in line. It's called a class action suit. And 1.6 million for one person, and there are 3,500 now in line. And this is what's happening in the world right now, that they are all turning against the chemical companies because of cancer. Now, let's see if this is going to work.
A new study funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences finds that perfluorinated compounds, or PFCs, widely used in manufactured products such as non-stick cookware, waterproof clothing, and fast food packaging were associated with reduced vaccine effectiveness in children. Philippe Grosjean from the Harvard School of Public Health led the study, and he offered his thoughts on PFCs and their effect on the immune system.
PFCs have been around for like 50 years. They've turned out to be incredibly useful as water and stain repellent compounds. So you use them for surface treatment. You use them for, textiles, rain gear, shoes to protect them against water seeping through. You use them for your rugs, your furniture upholstery, so that if you pour some coffee, then it just runs off the surface without creating a stain. This is what these compounds do. But the problem is that we're not only exposed from, textiles or from food packaging, we're also exposed because these compounds have entered the environment and the food chain. So now they're coming back to us through the food also.
This is Faroe Islands. And I bet you Iceland is not going to be any different. It's going to be the same thing.
The finding was very surprising to us in that the kids with the highest exposure to the PFCs, they had the poorest response to the vaccines and the greatest chance that even after 4 vaccinations, that the child would not be protected. What we saw was that when the PFC exposure doubled, the child lost about half of the antibody concentration, which is a steep decline. Sometimes we see that the vaccination doesn't take, and we don't know why. So then we discovered this, and then we realized, wow, maybe it's environmental chemicals doing this. There are animal studies that demonstrate that these compounds do have biochemical effects. In particular, we know from very recent studies that the PFCs prevent the white blood cells from sending hormone signals to each other. Cytokines, special substances that where one type of immune cell signals to the next, get going, there is a foreign protein here, or a vaccination, we need to produce antibodies. So the PFCs inhibit that response. I guess the paradox is that it's going to take us many years to come to the bottom of this situation with the PFC effect on the immune system. What does it really mean? What are the long-term implications? Are there infectious diseases involved, or about other diseases? It's going to take us many, many years to understand that. And in the meantime, you would really like to prevent these exposures because they may be hazardous to your child. Do what you can to avoid these compounds in the products that you bring to your home. And since products are coming out on the market now that are PFC-free, perhaps this will create a niche for safer materials. We will continue looking at the immune system dysfunctions associated with PFC exposure, and we will certainly also look at allergy, and we'll look at other vaccines, and we'll look at infectious disease. The spectrum may be even wider and also relate to non-communicable disease like cancer or autoimmune diseases like type 1 diabetes. So we shouldn't just stop with vaccinations and infectious disease. We should also think of what the immune system does in general
Is this what we want to pass on to our children? I can vote for you all that we don't want to do that. So somewhere we have to stop the release of any kind of foam, because firefighting foam is the biggest contributor globally to PFCs into the environment. And this movie here is, I'm going to leave my presentation with you. That movie here is about the study that was done at Faroe Islands. Now, Iceland is not going to be any different, I can tell you. The PFCs